You know, what comes to mind as I stand in front of you, one, it's an amazing honor to be here, and I've had a few of my friends remind me of our start from the basement, and it's something that I'll never, ever, ever forget. But standing up here today and thinking about the season we're in and living in Washington, D.C., which is about as different from Oregon as anywhere in the world, what you think about is the discourse that's happening in the country, the debate. That somehow seems to always put us on different sides. So we have left and right, north, south, east, west, black, white, Democrat, Republican, red, blue, and now purple. I don't know, they're going to come up with something else. I guess there'll be yellow states soon. And we are divided, and we're pushed apart so often. And for me, the good news of coming here today and seeing all of you is to think about what brings us together. And that's what I want to talk about, why we're actually together and what we need to do to be more together. Because what we do is not partisan, and I'm very proud of the fact that we work with people of all political stripes in all the different states, and that's never going to change at One Economy. And our name is, in fact, One Economy because we believe that there's one economy, and our job is to help everybody be able to join that economy. So the good news that I want to talk about is what brings us together and what ought to bring us together. And there's one thing, and Elizabeth said it in her speech, that I think about what brings us together and what should bring us together, and sometimes we forget it, and it's a very simple issue. And it's at the very core of what we do and what so many of you do, and that is the issue of human aspiration, that everybody dreams. Everybody thinks about a race that they want to run. They're dreaming a better life for their child or for themselves, no matter where you were born. You know, and we work with a woman in Baltimore who lives in public housing, and I think of her, and I think, you know, she has dreams. And when she was 3 years old, or when she was 5 years old, the dream for her was not to one day grow up and live in public housing. The dream for people that we work with is not to one day grow up and be a recipient of social services, or to go to a multi-purpose center to get a voucher. That's not what they're dreaming. They still have dreams. And what we need to do is figure out a way to unlock doors, because they're on one side of the door and we're on another. Everybody in this room, we're fortunate because we're on one side of that door. And yet there are too many people, no matter how you slice it, and it's not partisan, we have a lot of people on the other side of the door of an economic divide. And for them, it's a big, thick door that's hard to push against, whether it's not having health insurance, whether it's going to a poor school, or whether it is just being plain poor where it's hard to make ends meet. 35 to 37 million people, the size of the population of Canada, are living in the United States in poverty. They're on the other side of the door. And what still should bring us together is the fact that despite where they are economically, they have aspirations. So we've got to think about these barriers that exist, and what do we need to do to melt those barriers down? And the real good news is that we live in an extraordinary time. We live in a time where there are amazing tools of the 21st century, and I feel so fortunate to be living in this era. There are tools today that enable us to overcome barriers, barriers of time and space and place, barriers that used to hold people back. When that single mom would get on the train or get on that subway and then take the bus to get to a place to find out only that she's not eligible for what she was signing up for, or to get there and say, well, I work and I get off at 7, but you close at 5, that there's a way to do things in a 24/7 way. Or that when that person in Los Angeles, who's a new immigrant, who wants to access the system, nobody need be prejudiced against them because they actually don't know who they are. They can log on at 10 o'clock at night and they can find out what's there for them and their children. So we live in an extraordinary time, and we know in society that if a child has technology in the classroom and in the home, that they'll do better in school. But yet, we don't make that happen for everyone. We know that if we put some technologies in the home, and Intel and others will tell you, and Cisco and others will tell you, and I've seen it, that we can help people age in place, but yet we don't do it. We know that we spend so much of our gross national product on health, care 1/7 of our GDP, and we know that that could change if we use technology, but yet we don't. There is so much at risk if we don't use the tools of this time and seize this moment of this amazing era that we live in. You know, I try to describe to some of the younger folks, I no longer give my age in my bio, but I try, and I slip up every now and then when I talk about mimeograph machines and the great invention of erasable paper, you know, because I was one of these people who couldn't type and still can't, and if I wasn't seeing anyone at the time and she couldn't help me, then I had to, you know, do it myself. And I would take all night typing. And so they don't get that. Or imagine when you used to have to make changes in that document, what it took. And after you type the whole paragraph wrong, you know what I mean, if you're in my generation. So it is an amazing time that we live in, and yet we aren't seizing that moment. Our national policies are tepid. Our drive to make these changes are timid, and the consequences and the results are uneven. America continues to fall behind. Those of you who heard the forum today, you heard from Senator Durbin, who talked about where we ranked. And I know there are different equations of looking at that, you know, but if you have to start, when you look at a race, and you look at this world, and you have to start drawing it so fine based on, you know, tiny issues of, well, there are more people living here, the density is this way, this is this reason. We simply need the tools of the 21st century placed into the hands of everyone. You know, there's a poet that I like, his name is Van Dyke, and he talks about barriers, and he describes barriers as being invitations to courage. And what he talks about in a poem that I like is that we ought to have doors of daring. Because when I was thinking of my remarks today, I kept thinking of we need to unlock doors to unleash hope. And if we could unlock those doors, we would unleash a lot of hope. And he said, the bars of life at which we fret that seem to prison and control are but the doors of daring set ajar before the soul. There is a way forward, and we know it. That's what's the good news and also somewhat of the bad news. The disappointment is we know what can be done. I remember talking with an amazing educator in the Washington area, the state of Washington, a superintendent, and he described to me something that he called a smart classroom. And I said, well, what's that? What are the smart classes? He called the smart classes. And he said, well, he had convinced the teachers union to basically put this studio in the classroom where the teachers would go after the class is taught, and they would just do this little reprise where they would do the little basic, you know, here's basically what we talked about, here's what the homework assignment is, because you know when the kid gets home and you say, what's for homework, Susie? And she looks at you. A lot of people don't remember, but if you could click on, move that mouse around, there's my smart class, I now have the best homework help in the world because it was the teacher who taught me. I've not run into that anywhere else, and it's a shame. And there are innovations like that in different pockets and corners of the country. And whenever I see it, I always have this double-edged sword. I feel good that I found an innovation, and I feel bad that we've been timid to move it forward. And that's what the country needs to do. And there are some very basic things. We handed out a policy blueprint, and it's not about sort of every little line item that's in there, but what's important is we start off by the most basics of basics. Let's get broadband into the hands of every American. That's what we need to do. Let's get broadband into the hands of every American. Let's make sure. Let's make it available. Let's make it affordable. And actually, let's make it fast. And we need to make sure that happens. The innovations are the second part. There are amazing applications. I just mentioned one about the smart schools and the smart classrooms, but there are so many other things. You know, I watched as my parents dealt with something that so many people deal with in this country, which is diabetes. And I watched my mother suffer through the diabetes, lose that battle this year. But I watched my father try to deal with trying to get information. And what so many people deal with is what I call the post-doctor visit. You know, you go to the doctor, you feel like you know what's going on in there, and then you leave, and then someone asks you a question, I would ask him a question, Dad, what about X? And you get a blank look because you forget. You don't know what to do. And it's not like you're going to reschedule another appointment that quickly. And so there's much that can be done in terms of tools. So I started working on a tool, and I went to some of our funders, Robert Wood Johnson, and had great discussions and support from Cisco. And we developed a tool, and now we're working with George Washington and the head of cardiology there, Dr. Katz, to develop a tool to help people manage their chronic diseases. And in this case, it was first diabetes that has something on it called a virtual health coach, which we've just launched that tool. And now we're looking at ways to use that same technology for people who are dealing with heart problems. There are so many different applications, innovative applications. The skills are there. In fact, when I heard some folks talking, in this case at Intel, about aging in place, and they were developing some interesting tools, I said, but how are we going to get those tools into the hands of the poor? Are we going to once again have people who, if you have money, you're going to get the better care, and if you don't, you're on the other side of the locked door? That's what we need to do something about. And so our plan, our blueprint says, let's get that broadband, let's think about the innovations and the applications, and then let's make sure we do something very special for the youth, you know, and let's make sure every youth can get a laptop. We know that's going to make a difference in their life. We know what the cost would be, and it's reasonable, and we don't do it. That's what our plan calls for, and I encourage you to read it. It's online. We've passed it out. But we need a national effort that will bring these advances to every child in the country and every person in the country. So again, it's this human aspiration. What is it about technology that it can unleash a human aspiration? Well, because it's convenient. It's comfortable. You're not bound by someone looking at you telling you you're not somebody. People have dreams regardless of their income. And I feel, standing in front of you today, I've got to tell you that the emotion that I feel is as a person who's so grateful, so deeply grateful, because I have had aspirations just like you, but I have had enough people to say yes, to support me. And all the way back at moments like this, I remember my 6th grade teacher who said yes. I remember sitting at my table today, Judy Stavisky from Robert Wood Johnson, when we worked in a basement where we were out of money, and the 4 of us were toiling in the basement with this, what we thought was an aspiration and a great idea, and she just called me up out of the blue and stepped forward with the help. And we wrote a terrible proposal. And Judy called me up and said, now this proposal was a planning grant. So you get money to plan, but for us it was like everything. And it was a planning grant. And so Judy said to me, she said, Ray, I have one question for you about your proposal. This is before she told me it was lousy. And she said, Ray, it is a planning grant, right? And I said, yes. She said, well, why didn't you ever use the word planning in the proposal? And I said, oh. And she worked with us. And as she's at our table tonight, and she is one of those people who I urge you to please give a hand to at Robert Wood Johnson, Judy Stavisky. We absolutely would not be here. And then again, as I stand here today, because it's not yet the 1-year anniversary of a person who was my anchor in life and my brother's anchor, our mother. It's nothing, you only get one. And she taught us to fight, and she taught us to serve, just like my father did. And he's serving our country. I'm trying to serve in the way that I can serve. And I just hope and pray that her aspirations continue through our work and what we do, although very different in some ways, very similar. And all I ever think about is there are people just like me everywhere. And when I get the honor of being able to meet with them, I just like that look in their eye. And there's nothing like that experience when you see the look on their face. And you're going to hear one of our award winners tonight from South Africa. And I was there when we opened our program in South Africa. And it was one of the most deeply moving things to see the look on people's face when those computers turned on and they were able to go onto the internet for the first time, and they felt the power of information, that a door had been unlocked. And if you can capture that feeling, if you have that opportunity to see somebody, I encourage you to take that moment and see what it's like and try to live vicariously through them. because she's here today to share with us her experiences in South Africa. But it was pretty amazing. And the other thing that I thought was amazing is much of that community was very matriarchal. But when I arrived early that morning and saw the men in that community in Durban, South Africa, that were outside doing gardening work and fixing the mural that was on the wall of this new center, I said, now that's human aspiration. That's a door unlocked. And that's what we've got to remember in all that we do. I tell people, we're not a technology company. We're not a technology nonprofit. We're in the business of unlocking doors. And we're going to use the tools of this century because I think they're the best tools that have ever existed for mankind to do something about this. And as our panelists said today, and I think it was, I don't remember who said it, because they were all really brilliant panelists, but someone said, you know, technology doesn't solve our problems, and that's true. But what it can do is make the path to solutions that much easier. And that's what this is really all about. So we will continue to look at barriers as a way to courage. And what I want to leave you with is, I don't use the word digital divide. Because when we first started, we said, we're not going to use that word. You never hear us using that word. Because we said there is purely a digital opportunity. And this is our chance to grab that opportunity. We've got to seize that moment to grab it. And everybody in this room, the knowledge and the power that's in this room, we can push our government to be a better partner in making this happen. And we can continue to work with corporations. You know, sometimes people look at one economy and say, why do you work with corporations so much? That's a big part of our economy. They are a big part of the solutions. We don't run from working with a big part of the solutions because we are really in it together. You know, I call it the 3 C's. We look at people sometimes and we say, well, that's a constituent in government, if you're in government. But some people look at them and say, that's a client. The for-profit sector may say it's a consumer, and I say it's all the same person. And if we're going to get through this and our problems, we've got to focus on what brings us together, not the different colors of the names of what divide us. And that's really what this is all about. So with your support, we will do it one idea, one person, one opportunity at a time. And I leave you again with the words of Van Dyke. Say not too poor, but freely give. Sigh not too weak, but boldly try. And I promise you, we will continue to try every day that we're making this work at One Economy. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.